What's your name?
Noel Smith.
How old are you and where were you from?
I'm 55 years old and I was born in Charing Cross in London in 1960. My parents were Irish immigrants.
What would you say is your most noticeable trait?
That's a difficult one. I'm a very angry man, still, despite the fact I've done 5 anger management courses in the past in jail. I get very frustrated with things and have to learn how to hold it down. Most of my flashpoints come on trains for some reason.
What would you say are you most known for?
Probably writing now. I've done a lot of film work as well. I've just been in a feature film that's premiering next week or the week after, with some quite big acting names. But I suppose in the past I was known as a professional criminal, an armed robber, bank robber. And now I'm more known for my writing and other extracurricular work.
Since 1974, has your view on the police changed at
all? Yes, it has. I started out as a kid with a great respect for the police and an admiration for them. I'd watched all the police programmes when I was a kid, Dixon and Doc Green and Z Cars and stuff like that. And I didn't have no hatred for the police, and I kind of admired them, as I've said, but when my first interaction with the police was a bit of a bad one, and I ended up getting tortured and confessing to a load of crimes I didn't commit when I was a kid. They snapped my finger. And I kind of lost respect for them then and grew to hate them. My feeling about them nowadays is that we need a police force, and the majority of them are doing a decent job. But there are some police officers who are worse than criminals.
What do you think it was that made you take on crime almost like a full-time job?
It was immaturity and spite, really. The police had arrested me and charged me with stuff I didn't do and tortured me, and then continued to harass my family afterwards, even when they knew that I hadn't committed. They knew in the first place that I hadn't committed any of the crimes. And it kind of turned me against the police, and I decided, being a young boy, that the best way to fight it was to become what they wanted me to be. I know that sounds a bit strange, but I then set out to become a criminal, and I wanted to cause them as much aggravation as they had caused me.
And how many prison sentences have you served?
Well, I've got 65 previous convictions, and I've served over 32 years in prison in 36 different prisons. So quite a lot, really. I think my shortest sentence was 7 days. That was for criminal damage. And my longest sentence was 8 life sentences, and that was for armed robbery and possession of firearms.
Do you think that the more recent approaches to try and reform prisoners work?
I haven't really noticed any recent approaches to reform prisoners. The trouble is, in this country, we kind of use rehabilitation as like a buzzword rather than an actual plan. Certainly, we've just had Chris Grayling, who was the worst Minister of Justice ever, had no grounding in the law whatsoever. I think he was the first Lord Chancellor in 400 years to have no training in law. And he's actually ruined the criminal justice system and the prison system. I mean, he cut out rehabilitation altogether. And the man was a blatant liar. And also a bit of a Nazi. I mean, he banned books in prison, which is, you would think that the one thing you want prisoners to do is read and educate themselves, and he decided no, they shouldn't be doing that. So, yeah, I don't think there's been much effort at rehabilitation in the last 20 years in prison.
What was it that made you change from your life of crime?
It was actually a personal tragedy. My son died while I was serving a life sentence, and he was 19 at the time. And after the initial shock and grief of what actually happened was I had spent years building myself up as this ogre to the prison system. I'd attacked prison staff. I'd been involved in riots, sit-downs, attempted escapes, strikes, producing alcohol in prison, selling drugs, making weapons, hunting down sex offenders and seriously assaulting them. So when my son died, I was kind of like deep into that life in prison. I was serving 8 life sentences, and I went to the prison authorities and asked them to be allowed to attend my son's funeral. And they made me beg. They took great delight in making me beg, and then said no. They had no intention of letting me go anyway in the first place. So my next thought was to actually strike back against the prison system. And there was a couple of guys who were quite well-known heavy villains I was in Whitemore with. We were all dangerous people on my wing. And they didn't like the fact that I wasn't allowed to go to my son's funeral, so they come to me with a plan that we were going to take over the wing and hold several screws hostage. And they actually had a well-worked-out plan to do the screws. They were going to get a load of washing up liquid in buckets, spread it over the floor, pour it over the floor, ring the alarm bell. When the screws come rushing onto the wing, they'd slip into the washing up liquid, and we'd attack them with pool cues and snooker balls. There was about 40 of us. And this was all planned and ready to go ahead. And then I suddenly had a thought, and I thought, is this really any way to sort of pay tribute to my son and you know, honour his death by attacking a load of prison officers? And I thought, no. And it was the seeds of that made me think, do you know what, maybe I'll be better off trying to change my life for the better, and actually get out of prison and look after the rest of my children and my family, rather than being in jail stuck while, you know, things were going on that I had no control over. So I started to look for rehabilitation instead, and that was really where it started.
How many books have you written to date?
6 at the moment.
Do you plan on releasing any more?
Yeah, I'm actually working on 2 books at the moment. I've just released one called The Criminal Alphabet on Penguin. It came out last year. I'm not sure how well that's doing. But I did release a book with a small publisher about 8 years ago called Warrior Kings, which was basically the story of teenage subcultures in the 70s from 1976 to 1982, when you had a lot of sort of gangs, particularly in London and the big cities. You had your Teddy Boys, Rockabillys, Psychobillies, Skinheads, Mods, Soul Boys, Reggae Boys, New Romantics. You know, all teenagers were kind of in gangs at that time. And I wrote a book about the gang wars of the time, which I was heavily involved in, the fighting up the King's Road with the Teds and the Punks. And I've just withdrawn it, and I'm rewriting it again to release for the, I think it's the 25th or 30th anniversary. 1977, is it 30? Something like that, or 40. Yeah, it's the anniversary of the fighting up the King's Road, so I'm going to re-release the book with a new cover and new photos and some a couple of chapters added. And I'm also writing a book about my mother, her life story. She grew up in poverty in Dublin and moved to London at a young age and had me and various things. But yeah, I'm finding that quite interesting as well. It's a departure from what I normally do. It's more aimed at a more family audience, if you like.
Yeah. And how long have you actually been writing for Inside Times?
Actually, I've been writing for Inside Times since it first came out. I was one of the first letters in the first issue in '91. And I carried on writing and honing my writing in their pages over the years. I used to write articles for them and letters, and you know, almost every month you was guaranteed something from me in there. And they allowed me to grow as a writer as well. They published my stuff, and I was very grateful for that. So I was writing for them for many years from '91, and then when I was released in 2010, I had a girlfriend in Southampton, and I came down to see her and dropped into the offices, and I was offered a job. It just so happened on that day someone was leaving, and I took over their job. So for the last 6 years, really, I've been the commissioning editor on Inside Time.
And what is it you do now?
I do a bit of everything, really. I mean, my day job is in the office commissioning editor at Inside Time, where I deal with all the prisoners' letters and articles. I also, in the evening, obviously I'm writing. I do little bits and pieces for newspapers and magazines, do quite a lot of television documentaries, and a couple of feature films. I've been in about 4 short films since I've been out. I'm normally typecast as a serial killer, gang boss type, you know, person, which I don't mind. You know, you play to your strengths. So And I'm also a DJ as well. I try and fit as much into my life as possible. I suppose that's all the years of sitting in a cell doing nothing. So now I'm out, I'm working almost 19 hours a day.